Well, super SUVs may be all the rage these days, but let's not forget the original fast family car, the super sedan. And this is the latest in that lineup. It is the Audi RS7 Sportback and packs a 600 horsepower V8, really sleek looks and air suspension to keep you comfortable. But just to keep it honest, we've brought another one. The latest version of the original super sedan, the BMW M5 Competition. Before we go any further though, tell us in the comments which of these two super sedans would be your pick, the RS7 or the M5, and why. And if you like this video, go on and smash that thumbs up button and subscribe to the Autocar India channel for great auto content every day. Now, for a change, I'm not going to start with the newer car today because I want to reacquaint myself with an old friend, the car without which we wouldn't even have the super sedan segment, the BMW M5. Oh, it feels good to be back at the wheel of a BMW M5 again. It's a pretty special feeling. You sit nice and low, you're ensconced in the cabin, it feels like it wraps around you and really involves you in the whole driving experience. And of course, every BMW M car trademark these days, a really chunky steering wheel. And while the RS7 seats are pretty sporty and very comfortable as well, the ones in this BMW are just that little bit more special. I mean, look at these big wings. There is a vast array of adjustment, including shoulder support, and it all just helps you feel like you're driving a slightly more focused machine. Now, like with every BMW M5 since I think the E60, there is a wide array of settings with which you can customize the way this thing drives. Everything from more mundane stuff like the engine, gearbox, suspension and engine note, all the way to even the gear shift ferocity. What makes matters easier is that your settings can be mapped to these M1 and M2 buttons on the steering wheel here, and then on the fly you can just press one to activate the desired settings. Audi has a similar system in the RS7 this time with the RS mode button, which is also on the steering wheel. Now they've turned the wick up on the 4.4 litre twin-turbo V8 this time for the competition version, and power now stands at 625 horsepower. Can you really feel those 25 extra horses? Well, here on a road, I'm not entirely sure you can, but perhaps on a racetrack is where you can really pull out that extra power. But hey, the standard 600 horsepower was never exactly what you'd call weedy, was it? The thing about this engine though is, despite the fact that it is turbocharged, BMW has tried its very best to replicate the good old naturally aspirated days. It's quite rev happy and it makes its power in a progressive manner. It doesn't come in one solid lump like it does in the Audi. And what that means is, for the skilled driver, they can really learn to play with the power band and derive a lot of enjoyment from it. The other big change for this generation of M5 was the move to all-wheel drive. It caused quite a controversy amongst BMW purists, but the moment you drive it, you know it's not a problem at all. The way this car is set up is still very rear-wheel drive, with the front axle only coming in to help when you really need it. And what that means is it still has that classic BMW 50-50 weight distribution, that playful rear end, but if you get into a pickle, it'll probably pull you out safely. As with the standard M5, there is a rear-wheel drive only mode, but frankly that's only for skilled drivers who want a bit of dramatic tail-out action. In reality, 4-wheel drive sport lets you go quicker and is safer and plenty entertaining enough. And that's because the M5 is just so inherently well set up. God, the front end of this car is really sharp and pointy. I mean, just tilt the steering wheel ever so slightly and it will dart into the corner. Yes, this steering feels noticeably heavier than the one in the Audi, but it also feels a whole lot more purposeful. This feels like a proper performance car, a very serious performance car. And then you got to remember that this is the M5 Competition, and there have been a few changes other than just the increased horsepower. The suspension has been lowered and stiffened, and you can feel that immediately. The original M5 already did feel a little bit fidgety on its adaptive steel springs, but this one is even more so. Now, while this would be really beneficial out on a racetrack, in the real world, it does take away from the M5's everyday usability. These cars are also meant to be used every day, and that's why this competition version of the M5 does fall short just a little bit. It feels just a little too focused for our road conditions. One thing's for sure though, find the right stretch of road, put in the effort, and this thing is absolutely sublime to drive. The way the engine revs out is just so addictive, and then there are the dynamics. It's proper sports car stuff. Yes, the firm suspension does move you about quite a bit on our slightly bumpy roads, but that just goes to add to the thrill and keep you on your toes. It's not ideal, but it will make a better driver of you. And then there's the noise. This engine is quite a bit louder than the one in the Audi, and it bangs and pops on the overrun. It might leave you a little exhausted, white-knuckled, and in a cold sweat after a fun drive out, but you will feel alive. A hard drive in the M5 competition then will leave you grinning but a little shaken up, for better or worse. Stepping into the RS7 after that is like lowering yourself into a soothing hot bath. But that's not meant as a criticism. It's because the RS7 immediately feels so much friendlier. Visibility is a little bit better, the steering is lighter, and the suspension is oh so much more comfortable. As a car that you might find yourself using every day just to go to the shops, the RS7 makes a much better case. Its interior has a techie appeal with its dual screen infotainment system and digital dials that are much easier to read than the ones in the M5. But it's also the way the RS7 drives. It adds a degree of friendliness and usability the M5 just can't hope to match, thanks mainly to its compliant air suspension, light controls, better refinement, and gentler power delivery in comfort mode. But remember, on paper, this too is a 600 horsepower autobahn crusher. So how can it be so different? No, where the RS7 really separates itself from the BMW is in its character. Yes, they both use turbocharged V8 engines, torque converter automatic gearboxes, and have all-wheel drive. But what they do with that formula is just so very different. The RS7 feels a lot more calculated. It just wants to put its power down as aggressively as possible. The result is that the RS7 did a 0 to 100 sprint in a truly impressive 3.54 seconds, which is a bit quicker than Audi's own claim of 3.6. However, in the same test, the M5 competition did an even quicker 3.29 second dash. And that's because, quick as the Audi is, the BMW weighs a full 190 kilograms less. On to the dynamics, and Audi has made an effort to improve things. It's a bit more agile now thanks to its sporty rear differential and its rear wheel steering, but this is still a consummate quattro car. The aim of the game is grip, grip, and more grip. Push really hard in a corner and the G-forces will sooner tear your face off than the rear end breaking loose. No fuss, no drama, just grip and go. Incidentally, the rear wheel steer and sports differential are optional on the RS7, but they are both options we highly recommend ticking. Where the BMW feels like a rear wheel drive car that just happens to be all wheel drive, this one feels all wheel drive from the get-go. Put your foot down from a standstill and all four wheels claw at the tarmac and yank you forward. So yeah, you miss some of the playfulness that you get from the BMW, but this car is just so much more committed to putting its power down. It's also far easier to exploit all the performance available in this car, and even a novice can do it quite easily. It may be 25 horsepower down on the BMW M5 competition, but in the real world, full of bumps and crests and undulations, this car will let you exploit the power a lot better. So you can probably see a theme developing here, and the Audi's everyday usability extends to the back seat, which offers more legroom and more width. The M5's backseat is not bad, it's just that the RS7's is better. Then there are the boots, and though they offer up 530 litres on paper, it's the Audi's more practical lift-back boot that can hold more stuff. Now, styling is a tricky one because for some buyers, the point of a super sedan is to blend into the crowd. The M5 does that perfectly, and the untrained eye would probably not spot the lowered suspension, black grille, 20-inch wheels and aggressive bumpers, and could even mistake this for a 530D. However, if you want to stand out from the crowd, it's got to be the RS7. With no standard A7 on sale in India, it looks truly unique, and Audi has really brought the drama this time, with huge air intakes, flared wheel arches, lots of LED light trickery, and of course, that swooping roofline. It is genuinely stupefying how two cars that are so similar on paper could turn out to be so different in character. And frankly, each brings such a different proposition to the table that picking a winner isn't as easy as we thought. The RS7 is the better all-rounder and better suited to those getting their first taste of 600 horsepower, although it can feel a little clinical as a result. The M5 Competition has a punishing ride and can be quite an effort to drive, but as a pure driving tool and an entertainer, it is hard to beat. Different strokes for different folks, but then you have to factor in the price. At 1.55 crore rupees ex-showroom, the M5 Competition is a full 39 lakh less expensive than the RS7, which is priced at 1.94 crore. Granted, there will soon be a facelift for the M5 and maybe its price might get a slight bump, but we suspect there will still be a gap, and it's that price gap that's impossible to ignore and what ultimately lets the BMW take this victory from the Audi.